My name is Evan Digby, and I'm a product manager at Yummy Interactive, responsible for Software Shield, which is a digital rights management product. I've been working with independent and large-scale software and game companies for about 5 years now, and my job is to help them ensure that their software is purchased by as many people as possible. Throughout my time working in DRM, I've realized that the best way to help people increase their sales isn't primarily through copy protection. Although that's a big part when it comes to plugging the leaks in their sales. The best way to help people increase their sales is to empower them with tools to minimize the friction between being a trial user and a paying user of their software. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So today's session is called Bridging the Gap Between Download and Sale. And most of this presentation, I'll be talking about a tool that everyone who sells software digitally should already be familiar with, and that's analytics. So why do analytics work? Analytics work because they help us find the paths most likely to lead to the actions we want users to take. We can use analytic data to prune unsuccessful paths or promote successful paths. Successful paths are measured by actions, goals, conversions, whatever you want to call them. They're the key to selling software. So your ability to use analytic data to increase conversion will make or break your software company. This means that everyone should be using analytics to optimize their website. I hope everyone agrees with that. The question I'm covering in this session, though, is why do your analytics stop at your website when your sales pipeline doesn't stop there? Your nag or upsell screens, whatever you want to call them, are full of actions that you'd like your users to take, just like your website. Actions like purchase, play trial, register, create an account can all be found in your upsell screens. Does everybody here understand what an upsell screen is in the context I'm talking about? Download software, you double click it, you install it, screen pops up and says, you have 30 days left in your trial. That's what I mean by upsell screens. So during this presentation, I hope to help you understand that if you're not analyzing how your trials are utilized as much as you analyze your website, you're missing out on sales. I also hope to show you some methods of extending your analytic data collection beyond your website and into your nag screens so that you can optimize your entire sales pipeline as one flow. So I first became aware of the need to integrate your website's analytics and your application's analytics while working with a customer a few years ago. It was like 2010. The customer is one of the largest casual game companies in the world, and they have a few dozen game titles to their name. Their games are downloaded about 70,000 times per day. So with 70,000 downloads per day, life must be good for them, right? And the answer is maybe not as much as you'd think. The problem they faced is that of those 70,000 downloads, they were only seeing about 1% conversion. I mean, that's a reasonable conversion, but it's not amazing. Were they paying their bills? They were definitely paying their bills with that conversion rate. But were they making as much money as they could be making with 70,000 downloads a day? Almost certainly not. The funny thing is that every team in the company had a different opinion on what was going on. The business team thought people must be pirating their games, and yes, of course this is happening, but is that their big leak in their sales? The technical support team thought the games were too easy and people were finishing or getting bored with the games before the trial was over. This may have been true in some cases, but is this the big problem? And of course the development team, they think their games are great. They thought, hey, we're making a lot of money, where's the problem? So it was only the marketing team who really had the right answer. They had no clue what the problem was at that point. So where's the problem? At 70,000 downloads a day, obviously the internet marketing teams were doing their jobs. The SEO was working, their website tracks every possible piece of information, and they had an entire team dedicated just to analytics to ensure people who got to their website, downloaded and purchased their software. Well, purchased as much as they could. This clearly isn't where the problem with their sales pipeline is. People are downloading their software. It was their analytics team that eventually identified the gaping huge hole in their data. It's the subject of my talk today. what is going on in the space between the download and the purchase. It's desktop software, the software runs, what's happening there? Why aren't people purchasing the software? And they knew that the only way to fill in that void was to integrate analytics into their NAG screens. Now, they had an existing copy protection system. It was homegrown, it was close to 10 years old, and didn't provide any of the capabilities they needed to track the usage data. The marketing team asked the dev team there to create new trial NAG screen solution, new copy protection solution. However, given that the development team didn't really feel like there was a problem, they couldn't justify pulling any development resources away from game development, new product development, to find a suitable solution. So that's when they shopped around for solutions, and this is where we came in. So the question is, the analytics and marketing team put their heads together and identified points of data that they needed to track in order to fill the gap in their existing analytics. So what data did they need to continue their sales pipeline optimization into the NAG screens? You'll see them up there, but they already had download statistics. That's obvious. That's data they already have. The new data points they wanted were only possible to gather application side. Total users, average starts, I'll explain these a little bit more in detail, average play time, average trial utilization, and percentage of unpurchased, unexpired users. Now, before I get into details on these, I'd like to point out that I'm going to speculate quite a bit on the potential value of each of these data points. The reason for that is because ultimately each game or application is different, and patterns in the analytics mean something different to every product, every different type of trial, however you distribute your software, it's going to change. So you need to treat this data as you would with your web analytics to find the pattern or flow that leads to the highest conversion rate and promote that flow. The highest conversion rate for your software, not for this game company I'm talking about here. And then after my speculation, I'll return to the case study and discuss how our user, how this game company used that data and promoted their software. So the first data point, total users, basically measures how many people actually launch their games, how many people use their software. It lets them understand of all the downloads they're getting, how many people actually started it at least once. It also indicates how many users got to the NAG screen but didn't make it past. So it's pretty safe to assume that most people who download a product intend to install it and try it at least once. If your conversion rate from download to at least one use is low, you have a major problem. Maybe you're falsely advertising or something like that. So, the other question is, does your software even work in all environments that people are downloading it? That's one cause for, a low conversion from download to launch, or is it falsely advertised? So, beyond the value knowing the total users has on its own, it is also the foundation for many of the averages and the rest of the statistics. So tracking that is critical. How many people actually use your software is a pretty critical point to know. So average starts is simply a measure of how many times on average users actually launch your application. So after they download, how many times do they go into it, do they use it? This basically, it gives you a rough idea of how heavily used your product is. For most applications, heavy use should be a good sign and should predict a high conversion rate. Not always, but average number of starts is also an excellent number to help break your users down into segments. Your segments could be heavy use, light use, moderate use. So when you're analyzing the data, you can break it down into what do heavy users do, what do moderate users do, etc. And with your users broken down into these segments, can you find any patterns in the rest of the data? If you track downloads, or for example, if you track downloads from multiple portals, do you find that a particular portal brings you heavy users or light users? You can also track this data in the other direction and find out if heavy use really correlates to higher conversion in your case. If this correlation isn't true, perhaps your users are finished with your software by the time the trial expires. So heavy use with low conversion might also be an indication that your trial should be based on number of uses rather than a period of time. They use it a lot, they don't convert, it's probably because they're done with their software. Maybe you should limit the number of uses as opposed to how long they're allowed to use the trial. You can also segment your users by average starts over time periods. What I mean by this is by breaking the users down into users who use the software heavily at the beginning of the trial and then less by the end, users who use the software steadily over the entire trial period, and users who increase their usage over the trial period. It's a little bit rare, that last one, but there's different ways you can break down that data and different ways you can use it to segment what each of these users are doing. So the next point, average play time or run time, is a measure of how much time users are actually using your software. So after they start, how long is that software running? And of course, the caveat with this data point is that without user interaction tracking, this will only ever be a rough guess, as there's heavy noise in the data from users who leave the applications running while they're away from the computer. So you got to take it with a bit of a grain of salt there. And given that level of noise, the value of the statistic is debatable. Ultimately, it's up to the type of software. In a game, as with this customer, this is an absolutely critical data point. It will give an indication of the likelihood that your users are finished using the game before the trial is up. High play time with low conversion means you need to switch. It means you need to switch your trial period from a period-based trial from the first time they launch, say 30 days, to a cumulative execution trial rather than, a 30-day trial. So cumulative execution just means the trial counts playtime, not hours from the first launch. They get 30 minutes, 1 hour of playtime. Casual game companies have this part figured out already, as you rarely see casual games with a period-based time trial. But this type of time trial could be used useful for some software as well. On the other end of the spectrum, if your software is simply a data processor that runs briefly in the background, the statistics offers little more than indicating whether or not your software runs too slowly. So it's not really a useful data point in that case. So the next statistic is far more useful for period-based trials, such as 30-day trials, 15-day trials, etc., which are considerably more common among software developers as opposed to game developers. And so that is, on average, how many days between the first time the user launches the product and the last time the user launches the product. A statistic is critical to finding out if your trial is too long. Put simply, if most users who haven't purchased aren't utilizing the entire trial, either your trial is too long or your software isn't in the hands of somebody who needs it. So this statistic is almost a gimme when it comes to optimizing your trials. If you find that people who don't purchase your software are using it for an average of 16 days, make the trial 15 days. Of course, you need to be a bit careful with that, because if the average user who does purchase your software uses it for longer than users who don't purchase, it's more likely that your software is finding its way into the hands of people who don't need it, and that's the reason why they drop off in the middle of the trial. The last thing you want to do is cut down your trial to 15 days when the people who purchase it need a full 25 days to determine whether it fits their needs. So the last measurement I'm going to talk about is a bit of a weird one, and the customer is the one who called it unpurchased expired. Essentially, it's a measure of the percentage of people who are using up their existing trial, utilizing the software throughout the trial, but still don't purchase the end. So they're downloading it, they're using the entire trial, they're actively using it, and somehow they still don't purchase it in the end. And of course, this statistic seems to indicate that these users either couldn't afford the product or they thought it was great while it was free, but didn't see enough value to purchase it. And these are, of course, the users that you want to send offers to. If you have their email address, send them a coupon code. If you don't have their email address, the good news is you can see these users coming from a mile away and react accordingly if you have live nag screens. I'll talk about that in a bit. So if a user is constantly using the software, becoming very close to the end of the trial, you can change the offer near the end of the trial. You can say, hey, you're using the software, well, here's a 50% discount, here's a 25% discount. Of course, the different offer depends on the software you're using, the price point, etc. Of course, there are always users who always use the entire trial before purchasing, so you got to watch out for this data. If you find that people utilize the entire trial and then after the trial is over, they go and purchase your software, you got to be a little bit careful with offering coupons near the end of the trial period. Of course, I personally like to throw caution to the wind and say, give the coupon a try. Now that you can track the results in more detail, you'll find it easier to calculate whether you're really losing out overall. And so one final important point is that all of these points should be tied to a unique user ID that is same on both the app side and the server side, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So now the customer knows exactly what data points they want, and so how are they going to get it? There are three main components to getting the data they needed. So the first is finding a way to make the trial upsells dynamic so that we don't have to rebuild the application and redeploy or patch to react to the data. The second task here is to find a data gathering tool that will work both in your web browser and in your upsell screens or your nag screens. And of course, the third is to link those statistics from the web browsers to the statistics in the upsell screens. So the first hurdle we talked about here is how to deliver dynamic content. There truly was only one option for this customer. They had to drive dynamic live online content, HTML-based, into their upsell screens. Having live online HTML content essentially makes your upsell screens a website, which means you can use all of the tools you'd normally use to gather analytics on your web browser. You can use web services, JavaScript, etc., to track user interaction, have live updates, push out offers, do A/B testing, etc. Excuse me. So the only real question was, which browser do they want to embed into their nag screens? There's some options like Qt WebKit, Chromium. ISVCon interface is a nice one because then you don't have to pad their download. It's built into Windows if you're doing Windows-only applications. Or they could find a copy protection solution that already utilizes HTML-based upsell screens. And each of these have their benefits and weaknesses. Fortunately for our client, this is an obvious choice because Qt WebKit is already integrated into our solution, into our copy protection solution. So I'm biased on this part. Apologies for the shameless plug there. So the next step after you get this live content into your nag screens is to pick the method of tracking your user interaction. Google Analytics is excellent at what it does. It gives a perspective on the overall flow of how your users are using the nag screens. The downside of Google Analytics is that it doesn't easily link the web user to the application user. Essentially, going from your website to your nag screen is jumping from one browser to another. Google Analytics won't figure out that they're the same user, and you'll get two data sets instead of one. So another problem with Google Analytics that we found for this is that it doesn't link sessions between the start and exit of your applications unless you leave the nag screen running in the background while your software is running, and of course that takes valuable assets from your user. It bloats your memory, and it's not a good idea to leave it running in the background. So that's not good. The final nail in the coffin for Google Analytics is linked to that problem. It won't give you any statistics about the usage in between the first nag screen and the exit nag screen. It can't tell you how long somebody's running your application. So our customer in this case, their marketing team, they have their own web development resources, which are separate from the game development resources. So in the end, they settled on building a custom client-side JavaScript API, and that pushes user actions to their existing homemade web analytics solution. So essentially, they went the route of create your own solution. I think it was implemented in just a few days. It wasn't a complicated thing, and it gave them access to all the raw data they'd require to calculate the desired data points that they needed. Excuse me. So the final requirement they had is to find a way to link a unique visitor of their website who downloads to usage statistics within the application or within the nag screens. How can they pass data between the user's web browser and their nag screen browser? Why is this important? Well, It's great to track website usage statistics and app usage statistics separately, but ultimately our customers needed to be able to chart the flow from a single of a single user from the first time they hit their website to the download, to the application usage, to the purchase at the end. So it was really important to them to kind of get that overall flow. So there are a few different options for linking a running application to a web user ID. You can implement user registration, a download manager, tag the download files with a unique ID, require a serial number to activate a trial, store all the data in Flash cookies, which are local shared objects, and they open the user's default browser on first launch. So of those, user registration is the most direct and probably the most accurate way to ensure a web user is the same as a software user. Unfortunately, it adds friction to your sales pipeline. It can reduce the number of people who actually want to download your software, requiring them to sign up for an account and then log into that account when they launch the software. So typically user registration, best for software as a service and higher price point products where people are used to that need to register. A download manager is another fairly accurate way to link the download and the users. You get full control. However, download managers, of course, take significant development and QA time. You essentially sign yourself up to develop an entire different application when all you're trying to do is sell the one you've already made. So download managers aren't great in that respect. And of course, they also add friction to your sales pipeline. I know I personally don't like download managers, and I try to avoid them or circumvent them whenever possible. I go to a different portal. I try to download the same product a different way. It's not always nice. So download managers, they're really best utilized by software publishers who have dozens or hundreds of titles. They want to cross-sell those titles. And with hundreds of titles, the overhead of developing the manager doesn't overshadow the development of the individual products. They just treat it as a different SKU. The next option, tagging a file, is essentially embedding a different user ID into each downloaded file. If done right, it's actually probably the most transparent to the end user, but it's also probably the most technically overcomplicated of them all. It's the type of solution that really only a true hacker would want to implement. But the side benefit of tagging the downloaded file is that you can actually track who's sharing the installer, and from this one download, how many installs on how many different computers do you actually get. In this customer's case, of course, they didn't need to track that information, but it's definitely a nice point to have. So the next option is to require the user to enter a serial number before they start their trial. And it's one of the easiest to implement, and it's also pretty accurate. If you fulfill a serial number when they click that download, they get it in there, and then the user has to enter that before they even get 30 days to try it. But it too adds friction to the sales pipeline. It might reduce your conversion. People always have problems copying and pasting a serial number. It doesn't go in right. They're not connected to the internet. There's all sorts of problems that they might have there. So in my experience, it's mostly been utilized for people developing educational software designed to, for use by schools, universities, and essentially software used in large organizations tend to do that type of a philosophy. So an IT administrator will go in, activate all of the different trials, and you can get statistics out of that. So the next step, using Flash cookies, which are also called local shared objects, it actually the only requirement really is that you have a web browser that supports Flash, which, depending on who you ask, is 98% of the web browser population. So that's pretty good. It's not the most accurate, but it's a pretty good level of people to link. And Flash cookies are stored on disk in a common location. So once the user's ID is stored on the disk, they get to your website. You create a Flash cookie with their ID, and you can read it from another browser. You can read it from pretty much anywhere. Of course, some browsers like Google Chrome particularly, they like to put their stuff in their own location, so it kind of complicates that a bit. So this really means that you need to develop your own Flash cookie reader that searches for all the possible locations, whether it's Chrome's, all that sort of thing. So it's a fairly simple task. The format is well documented online, but it does require effort that you might not want to go through. And of course, the final solution I talked about there I'd mentioned up there is opening a default browser on first launch. And it's essentially, it's the easiest to implement, and it's really very little friction to your sales pipeline. The biggest difficulty you have with that solution is if the user isn't online or anything blocks this process in the first launch, they're forever lost. There's no way to recover that user ID. It's totally unlinked. So of these solutions, our customer decided to go with the Flash cookie solution. They have Flash all over their website. It's required, so it was pretty much a no-brainer for them. So now we have all the pieces we need. We're tracking the user's path through your website. We're tracking we're linking the user on the website to the application user. We're tracking the user's usage of the software, and we're able to update the offer displayed to the user in real time to react to trends in the data. So what's the next step? And I guess the next step would be to release your software into the wild and monitor the data. So at this point, I'd like to just do a little quick demonstration. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm not an artist, so this demonstration isn't pretty, but it's technically accurate, and it'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about here before we go into too much. But before I start the demo, is there any questions about anything? Can I clarify any points here? No? Everything's good? All right. Here we go. So I did mention it wasn't pretty, didn't I? Here's the analytics portal that I created for this demo. It has all of the statistics we've been talking about, and it gives me the ability to do an A/B test here. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the homepage for my software. So think of this as your homepage for your software. You want the user to download. It's nice and simple. And you can see that once I click download successful, pretended software just downloaded there. And you can see that it's actually tracked the fact that there's a download. You get an ID on the left there, and you can see that they get to the home page, they get to download, and they're successfully downloaded. This is our web analytics. And of course, we see the total number of downloads. Oh, total number of downloads hasn't updated. My apologies there. And so the next step is that once they've downloaded the software, they run the software, they install it, they run it. And you can see here's the default NAG screen that I've created. This was created with our Software Shield product. The no discounts today I've added. There's no offers that they have that. You probably don't want to show that to the end user, but it'll make sense a little bit later. So you can see that they go in, they launch the software. Hi everyone, this is my ISVCon notepad, and they exit, and so you get an exit NAG screen. It's great. It's a pretty typical process, and you can see that if everything's working properly here, which it is, you can see that it's the same ID being tracked throughout the process. So they've downloaded, the web browser ID was generated. They start their promo. You can see which of the promos you're offering them right now, and you can see the whole process. So you can see that I've started the software more than once, that now the download is updated for you. That's good. And there's one user of the software. So the next step is you see your data, you analyze it, you decide I need to offer a discount at some point. So I'm going to switch to promo B here. You can even actually go to the website, and you can see that in this version the download button's above the other one. It's just to demonstrate that you can change it live. You can change what's on your website. Everybody knows that already. That's how people use the web. It's live content. But the nice thing is that I haven't had to re-download the software, and changing the promo server side has actually pushed out a new discount to the user. So you can actually, at any point in their trial or for any reason, you can give them an offer. You can change. You know, you could even change the layout of the screen if you find people aren't finding the launch button, you know, people aren't getting to launch, you might just want to make it a big launch button. Or if people are never hitting the buy now button, you might want to change the visibility of that. There's all sorts of things you can do there. And of course, throughout this second launch, you can see that it's still tracking, but now we can see that promo B is there. So it's a pretty rudimentary download, or sorry, a pretty rudimentary demo of this type of philosophy. Is there any questions about what I've shown there? Okay, let's all switch back to the presentation now.
Promo A versus promo B in terms of tracking, is that specific to just the discount message that's being sent out?
Yeah, in this case, to keep it simple for the demo, it's simply the server delivers an image. If it's promo A, it delivers one image. If it's promo B, it delivers another image. You can go further than that. You can actually have the nag screen that pops up. Here, I'll bring it up again. You can have the nag screen completely load from the web server. You know, you want to have an offline fallback. That's a given. If people are offline, you want to show something, get them into your software. But for online content, you can change the whole thing. And it's really up to you. And this demo hasn't done any segmentation, so it's not looking at the period of time. You could say, oh, well, there's 28 days left. Great, give them nothing. There's 2 days left, they still haven't purchased. Now push out a discount. There's all sorts of different things you can do with that. Any other questions? Yep.
When you were tracking that the demo expired and people were using it after the expiration, do you somehow extend it internally, but they visually see that it expires? Is that how that's detected?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So,
you said that there was that fourth class to the game developer where people used it all the way up to the end, and then
oh yeah, okay.
beyond.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the question is, you know, how do you actually calculate that statistic of people? So they weren't looking so much people are using it beyond the expiration. They were looking at people who were using it all the way up to the expiration and getting to the screen where it says this is expired. And of course, because that's a different screen, it's easy to just push out a different action into your analytics. Yeah, if you start seeing people after the expiration, you know, continue to be able to launch the software, then you have a different problem on your hands, and you might want to curb that as soon as possible. One of the things, actually, I haven't mentioned it in this so far, but as the case study goes, one of the things they actually did is once they got to the expiration, they are expired. It means they still want to play it, so that's actually a great time to push somebody out an offer. They've launched it again. They may or may not know it's expired, but they've launched it somehow. So give them a discount, give them an offer, show them the value of buying your software at that point, or change the offer. Anything else? So we've done a bunch of speculation so far, and now our application is out in the world, and we see the data rolling in, but how do we react? We've talked about this a little bit. You know, before we had live upsell content, you can only react by going back to the code, developing a new upsell, creating a new release, and starting from scratch. And what I mean by starting from scratch is just that. Your existing downloads and installs are lost in this type of a model. Any downloads that didn't convert, they're gone forever. So this is where online live content into your upsell screens really comes into play. Live content gives the ability to present a new offer or a new upsell screen to existing installs that are still using your software. Of course, you can never push out something out to somebody who has never launched it. People don't like that. But if you're seeing a trend in how people arrive at the sale, you can actually try pushing out a new nag screen that highlights the path that got them there to see if more people find that path. So if you find that people download from page A instead of page B, you know, push that page A out to more people or highlight it on your screen, give a bigger offer, you know, direct people there. And then if you find that people who are, you know, heavy users of the software, are the ones who purchase it in the end, great. You can react basically to the data at hand here. So if you're seeing these trends in the data, you can actually start pushing new offers out to them, or better yet, you can push it out to a small segment of people as a test group and compare the results. So if you have enough people using your software, you can say, well, yes, this is working. This is the flow that's great. I want to start pushing this new option out to a small percentage of people. Or even better still, you can come up with several options that highlight that path in a different way and push each one out to a different segment of users, compare the results. This is all pretty standard A/B testing web analytics philosophy. The only difference is now you can apply it to your NAG screens, you can apply it to your trials. So if there's a clear winner, in all the different options you've pushed out, roll it out to everyone and reap the rewards of it. Or if any option decreases sales, obviously you want to prune that option and push out different options to the people who are receiving that offer. So this is just one idea of how you can react to the data you're getting. Ultimately, because you are the one who knows your users the best, it's up to you to analyze the new data you have and come up with a strategy on how to utilize this new data, this whole new data set that you have. So what I'm really trying to highlight here is that dynamic content allows you to react quickly to what you're doing, and retract quickly if you make a mistake. That's one thing that the customer was actually really feeling before they had dynamic content. If there was a bug in the NAG screens, forget the software, because the software you always have to rebuild it. You have to push out new patches and things if there is a bug in there. But to have a bug in their NAG screen is terrible. And they had to rebuild, they had to repush, people weren't able to launch. They dealt with all these problems before they had kind of dynamic content. They could update it live without having to push out new software. So if I could offer one final piece of advice on this subject, yes, you can push it out live, yes, you can react quickly, but minimize how many times that you change the interface for an individual user. Offering promos and things isn't a big deal. They like that, they like getting a discount. But if you move a button every time they launch the software, they're going to react poorly to that, and they'll probably not want to use your software much anymore. So yes, react quickly, but temper it a little bit, or if you have a new option, push it out to a different group of users and rotate through them. So that's, yeah. So essentially, back to the case study. So I've spoken quite a bit in the hypothetical, when discussing how to utilize the data, but you're probably wondering how this specific client made out with these new options. So ultimately, they did this, over the course of a year, and ultimately their new data determined that the biggest gains were to be made by adjusting the trial lengths for each of their products individually, actually. So some products they needed longer trials, some products they needed shorter trials. Sometimes people were able to finish the game before the trial was up. And so in some cases they switched from time trials to stage locked, meaning that it doesn't matter how long the user plays, they'll always be locked out at a certain point. Similar in applications to feature locking, they can use it to a certain point, they can't print, they can't process, they can't do something. It's the same type of philosophy. And this philosophy allows them to ensure the players reached a high point when asked for money. So they're not stuck at somewhere frustrated in the game, they can't pass this level, and then all of a sudden the trial expires and they throw it away. That was actually one of their biggest problems, is people were getting stuck on difficult levels. Well, if you make it the trial always end at the end of that level, they're frustrated, they finally finish it, they have that sense of accomplishment, they want to move on, they want to purchase it. Or, it's a little bit of a game-centric philosophy, but it can be used, you get everything up to a point, they can see the data, how it's going to be printed, they want to print that data. It's just one example. That's the point, to ask them for money and say, hey, if you want to get this to the next step, you have to pay us. So ultimately, this customer tweaking their trials, and of course they continued to use other sales tactics and whatnot over that year, they're actually able to increase their conversion from 1% almost to 2%, which, 2% still isn't amazing, but it's 100% improvement over their original numbers. So it was actually really, really great for them. It doubled their sales. Of course, they were offering discounts and whatnot, so it tempers the amount of income they get from that, but the actual conversion rate went up 100%. So it's pretty good. So the question, to wrap things up, the question that I presented today is, how do you bridge that gap between download and sale? And I hope I've demonstrated the answer to that question is we bridge the gap by extending what we already know about optimizing our website into our trials and ultimately into our applications. So, I have some time now for questions. I believe I do anyway. Oh yeah, I'm doing okay. So anybody have any questions about this stuff? Yeah. How does our software work? Yeah, so our software, essentially, we are copy protection, we are DRM, we are a wrapper. So what that means is you point it at your executable or your DLL or whatever, however your software is distributed. It's centric to downloadable applications, executables, Mac apps and whatnot. We take that, we pull it apart, we relink it with our encryption, with our security, and we link the code that launches the NAG screens and tracks the user's progress in the trial, writes out the license state securely and whatnot. So we pull it apart, we encrypt it, we do all that, we put it all back together, and then the package will automatically launch the NAG screen at the start, run the software, and then launch another NAG screen either on expiration or exit. It seems pretty simple to our users, but it's quite a bit going on beneath the surface. So, yep.
How do you find high dollar vertical market applications with copy protection? What do they tend to lean towards as far as they had a 90-day trial or something like that? Because obviously you're not going to get somebody into something like that in a 15 or 30-day time frame, because
of course.
There's a window that we'd have to take to try and learn the software.
Yeah, no, of course. High dollar software, we find that they couple a trial, for example. One of the nice things about what we do, and another shameless plug, is that they can extend trials. So they maintain that business relationship. They find out where they're at in trialing the software. Oh, I picked it up and then, I got busy with work 90 days later. Can I still trial? They can extend that trial, and they want that flexibility. So the length of the trial for that is somewhat arbitrary. You want to keep it long enough that somebody will say, okay, I really have time to get into the software. I have time to determine whether it meets the needs of my business. I have time to, do a little bit of a training focus group and all that sort of stuff. So you want to give them a long enough trial that they feel that. But most of our customers actually take it case by case, and they maintain the relationship with that customer. I mean, it depends if the high dollar value is $500, you might not have the type of a sales process where you're in constant communication. If it's $1,500, $5,000, of course you're going to maintain communication with that customer. As far as copy protection goes, that's what I find. Yeah, and user accounts are often linked with that, because it's requiring somebody to log in, just as far as the security side goes, not so much the offer and the upsell, but on the security side of things, they link the trial, the copy protection, so that the code encryption with a user account, so they know who's using that software at all times. You get into manufacturing and hospitals, businesses where they can't be linked online, then yeah, it would be like a 90-day trial and give them the ability to extend that if they need to.
So what do you find as far as serialization? So as far as if a company's going to, they install the software, let's say pretty large install, and then there's an upgrade that comes out 6 months later.
Yeah.
They got to install that one now as well, but they serialize the software on the user end. They don't serialize it on the deployment end. Do you find that is there a way to track that then to where they don't have to go through that serialization process during an upgrade, or do they usually have to? You follow the question?
No, I'm not following the term serialization in this context.
If you use a serial number.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
For the software. So if they put in a serial number, okay, here it is, and then an upgrade comes out 6 months or a year
Yeah.
later, they upgrade the software. How do you hold on to that serial number so that it,
Oh, okay. So, in our specific product, we store the license state on the computer. So it's up to our customer, the software distributor, publisher, developer, to determine whether a new upgrade requires a new serial number, requires a new activation, or it maintains the existing activation. You go from version 1 to 2, you might want them to purchase. You go to 1 to 1.1, you don't want them to have to repurchase, or it's a bug fix or whatever. So that's the type of situation where, as long as they haven't reformatted their hard drive, you can maintain that state. So the state is separate from the actual binary executable. So any other questions? All right, so thank you very much for your attention today, and I hope you've learned something interesting. My name is Evan again. I work for Software Shield. I'll be here all weekend if you have any other questions about our product, about what I've talked about today. Tried to minimize the shameless plugs in here, but out there I love to talk about our software, so definitely come give me a call.